Good evening and welcome back to the Kyle Hooten Tonight Show presented by Alpha News. I'm your host, Kyle. This evening, we're joined by another panel, the second one we've had this week. Very exciting. On this panel, we have Oredola, Alfrieda, and, oh goodness, Kofi, and Rebekah Hagstrom. They're joining us now to speak about school choice in Minnesota. This is an issue that you hear conservatives talk about quite frequently, but very infrequently do you find anybody that really understands it. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
First off, I want to get us all sort of acquainted with one another. Let's start with Rebekah. What's your relation to the education system and what motivated you to come on the show tonight?
So I'm the founder and headmaster of Liberty Classical Academy, which is a pre-K through 12th grade classical and Christian school in White Bear Lake. And I also have a radio show podcast out of the Patriot called Education America. And we cover a lot of important educational issues, school choice being one of them. And I'm just a strong, passionate believer in school choice. I believe every child has a right to an excellent education, regardless of where they live. And I got connected to Oredola and Alfrieda several years ago through a common friend. And Oredola now has a child at our school. And so we've just connected more. And she's the one who's connected with me with Kofi. So it's been great to see this effort moving forward together.
Absolutely. Oredola, very nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show. You have a child at Rebekah's school, and you're also concerned about school choice, correct?
Yes, correct. I'm a mom of 3 boys. I'm actually a single parent, and so I've been very involved. My kids were all in the St. Paul public school system. I think back in the good old days, and then things started to go bad, and I actually witnessed it live, what was going on in the schools. I ended up taking my my kids out of St. Paul public school, put them in charter, then, returning, at least one returned, one is in a charter, and then one is now in Rebekah's private school.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Kofi, very nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on the show. Why are you concerned with school choice?
I'm a mom of 3 boys, and I have one of my boys is almost 17 and he has special needs. And so yeah, I've always been concerned about the issues with equity and people of color and the poor. And for me personally in my life, I had a very difficult upbringing as a child, and education was the way out for me. And I see that it's the way out, the key, and the way out of poverty for many people. And so that is why it's important to me.
Absolutely. Last but not least, Alfrieda, thank you so much for joining us. Same question.
Thank you for having me. Yes, so I have seen the power of school choice in my own life. When I was going into 4th grade, my parents moved me from the public school system I was in a suburb of Chicago, Illinois, and enrolled me in a Lutheran grade school. And I tell people that it changed my life, and I got this great education and used that to become a lawyer. I worked here in a company in St. Paul for 30 plus years, retired and started volunteering in the local school system, and just started seeing that there were things that I didn't like. And I thought about my own parents and their ability to move me to a private school when they saw things they didn't like. And just realized how expensive it is to send kids to private school these days. And so just became really interested in finding a way for all parents, regardless of income, regardless of ethnicity, to be able to give their kids a quality education.
Absolutely. It seems like between our panelists, we have multiple very compelling real world cases of why school choice is so important. Somebody clarify for me and also for our audience exactly what school choice is. The name is fairly self-explanatory, but for those viewers who might not be familiar with this issue.
We probably all could.
I know.
Rebekah, you spoke first.
All right. Well, it comes in many forms, school choice does. I mean, even charter schools are considered an element of school choice. And that's what's interesting, is that Minnesota led the pack on charter schools. We were the first state in the nation to have charter schools. And yet now we are so far behind many other states when it comes to other choice options. And so the particular school choice legislation that we're talking about right now is the bill that Roger Chamberlain put before The Senate File 960, and that includes ESAs, which stands for Education Savings Accounts. And that is where the money actually follows the child to the school of their choice. It covers many different things like textbooks and tuition. But the nice thing about this, because so many people who are opposed to school choice say, well, it takes money away from the public schools. And the nice thing about ESAs is that they actually leave about half the money in the district itself. So only the state money follows the child. The federal and the local money stays in the district. So it's a nice balance because it provides that opportunity for the school or for the students, but it also leaves money back in the district for them as well.
So if I'm understanding this properly, it basically provides an incentive system for schools to furnish a better education, because if they fail to do so, students will leave and some of the money will go with them, correct?
Yeah, and I just want to tell you on that note, there is research that documents that across the nation, that where school choice in the form of education savings accounts or vouchers are put in place, the academic achievement gap actually narrows pretty consistently and pretty significantly. And I believe that that is the reason why.
Absolutely. Speaking of achievement gaps, that's something that we see featured quite prominently in Minnesota schools. Kofi, you mentioned that school choice can have a positive effect on education disparities. How does this function?
Well, currently in Minneapolis, St. Paul, currently in Minnesota, for fourth grade proficiency for kids who are Black compared to white kids, for reading, it's 66%. For white kids, 34% for Black kids. Math, 63% proficiency for white kids and 26% proficiency for Black kids. And so there's this huge, huge gap. And there's a lot of people running around today talking about equity and Black Lives Matter, and they really want to do something to help, and people just throw money up into the air. I know Amazon's been criticized for saying Black Lives Matter and being asked to account for what they have done. And so I feel like this is a way to get kids, if parents are unhappy with what their kids are learning, they can move them to a school where they can perform better. And Oredola just has some great stats on like how you will have kids from the same neighborhood. One goes to Minneapolis public schools, one goes to a private school in Minneapolis, and they perform a lot better. Do you want to go into that, Oredola?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Sorry, I'm taking the lead.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Makes my job very easy.
But she can answer better than me.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's just going through the data. As we're organizing this this effort, I wanted to give people information. So you take a school like Cristo Rey or Hope Academy, and their private school, they seem expensive. So, relatively, I think at Cristo Rey it's $13,000 for tuition. Hope is like $12,000. But the Minneapolis School District, the kids you're actually paying around $26,000 is what the school is getting for kids. And you can, there's no doubt in anybody's mind about the outcome. Who has the better outcome? The other two have about a 96, 98%, 99% graduation rate. And now they'll show you data to show that the Minneapolis school system and the public school system in general are closing the graduation gap. But what they don't tell you is that they lowered the standards. So they took away tests and things so they're basically masking the data. And there's a huge complaint I know of, just being around the circle of kids that leave and go to college and then have to pay money for remedial classes because they did not get the education they needed out of the public schools. So
how is that even possible, that you give public schools twice the amount of money that these private schools have to work with, and the outcomes are so significantly worse? Has anybody provided a reasonable explanation for that?
No, and every time you bring everything up, it's we need more money. We need more money. That's the argument. It's always give us more, and you see that they get more and the outcomes continually do worse. I think we know education spending has skyrocketed and the outcomes are worse. So, I see, having been, involved in the public school, that they're doing all the opposite things for success. They're doing all things, the wrong things to get our kids a good education. And it just feeds on itself. For example, they do all this thing around, tolerating bad behavior in the classroom. And then there's a rise in violence against teachers or whatever. And then they come around and say, well, we need more counselors, then we need more therapists. And all of those come in, and that's where all the money comes in. It's really not really, it's probably that's not even touching the kids, it's touching the administration and all these programs. And, it just builds on itself. It's a huge, just a layer upon layer upon layer. And that's where that sucks in all the money. That's where the $26,000 goal, and it doesn't go into educating the kids.
Ironically, it seems like lowering standards actually makes education more expensive because you have to invest in these counselors and this administration to help the failing kids. And
Absolutely.
that is truly astonishing, truly astonishing. This question is addressed to anybody on the panel. I understand there's some legislation right now before the Minnesota legislature, SF 960. Explain to our viewers what that is and how this could help remedy the problem.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that is the omnibus, the Senate omnibus education bill that Roger Chamberlain put forth, and it did pass, and it's now in conference committee. And that's the one that includes these education savings accounts. And it's really important that people use that language. We are asking people to write to their legislators and to come to a rally. I'm sure you're going to let everybody talk about that in a while, but part of the important language of that is to then say support education savings accounts, because that's actually the language in this legislation. And that's what's going to allow people to be able to take that state money that would have gone to the district. They can take that to a private school of their choice, or they can use it for homeschool curriculum as well, up to a certain amount of money. And then the federal and the local dollars will actually stay with the district. So that's going to go to conference committee on Monday is what I was told.
Okay. What do you think the likelihood is that we're going to see these education savings accounts actually implemented here in Minnesota?
Well, anybody who knows Minnesota would say it's an uphill climb, but we all here on this call believe that anything is possible and that it takes a lot of hard work. Obviously, we are doing our due diligence, and you can maybe ask the others about some of the things that we're doing. But yes, typically in Minnesota, you're not going to see support for that. However, when you hear statistics like what Oredola just shared and what Kofi just shared, again, I go back to the fact that this should be a nonpartisan issue. If you truly care about racial justice, equity, all of those things that I believe both the left and the right agree upon, it's how you deal with it is the question. To me, the best thing to go forward is to give those parents the opportunity to send their kids to the school of their choice, and to force them to stay in public schools that are failing is it's the greatest injustice you could possibly imagine. And I just think that it's appalling to me that any legislator would back that. And so yeah, it might be an uphill climb. Traditionally, the unions want to stand in the way of it. And that's where I hope that people being upset about these inner city test scores, especially, but also the shutdowns of the schools due to the COVID, the union standing in the way of reopening schools, and now the influence of the critical race theory in and I guess all of the public schools, I should say, because it really is, I think, pretty much true at this point. I hope that people will finally put enough pressure on their legislators and on the governor that we can change history in Minnesota and actually get these ESAs passed.
Absolutely.
I've seen the governor change his mind on things that I never thought he would change his mind on because people asked him to. A small example was during COVID, all the golfers were upset because they thought this doesn't make any sense. Why can't we golf? It's ridiculous. And the governor changed his stance on that. He changed his stance with the Let Them Play group on allowing kids to reopening sports again. My son was in basketball and he stopped playing, and then he was allowed to play after a group advocated for themselves to the governor and had a rally in front of his mansion and made logical requests. He changed his mind. And so I'm hoping that when we explain our reasoning and how important this matter is, that he will change his mind. I mean, the kids in Minneapolis and St. Paul are suffering the most when it comes to achievement. And yet their schools were closed more than any others. You have all these white kids and richer kids in the suburbs and in the rural areas that continued to learn through COVID. And these schools were shut down because the teachers refused to come back. And so I just think that now is the time to make a push for it, because, you know, it's now or never. Like, we need to work on it. And I think there is a chance. I think there's a chance that we can convince people. Otherwise, you know, I work full time and I have my kid with special needs. He's 17, he's still in diapers. I have a lot going on and I'm dropping a lot to work on this issue because I think it's that important.
Absolutely. We've heard some pretty compelling statistics. We've heard some pretty compelling legislative and political arguments. I also want to hear some personal testimony. Alfrieda, I think you mentioned that your experience with school choice was extremely impactful in your life.
Right.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was in a public school, not in the town I lived in, but in the town next door. And when I was at the end of third grade, for whatever reason, the boundary shifted. And so they were going to move me to a different school. And this is back in the 60s when public education, I think, was at a higher level than it is at this time. But my parents just looked at that school and they weren't interested in me going there. They didn't think I would get a good education. So it was a sacrifice for them to pay for private tuition, but they sent me to this Lutheran school. And you could just tell that the quality of the education was better. The class sizes were smaller. There was a faith component to it, which I think for a lot of kids is really important. And so I just came out of that school just very well prepared for high school. And that was back in the day when you had what they call tracking, which is, I guess, is frowned upon now. But, you know, we were tracked according to you're going to college or you're going to trade school or wherever. And so I got tracked into college and from there to law school. And, you know, the rest is kind of history. And, you know, I'm supposed to be retired. I'm supposed to be just sitting somewhere relaxing. And volunteering in our school district and just seeing, you know, what was going on with curriculum and discipline just was very jarring to me. And it's actually made me decide I want to start a school. So I'm working on doing that. We hope to open in the fall. But it's made me turn into an activist. And, you know, we've seen what activists have been able to do in our society lately. I don't necessarily agree that we've seen activists do things that are good for our society. But I think in this instance, those of us that are passionate about education and choice, we need to be activists and we need to get out there and make some noise about improving the quality of education for all of our kids.
Absolutely. Hey, tell me about this school that you're going to open. I mean, I've never been in a Zoom call before with two people that have or are planning to found schools. It's kind of unique.
Well, it's like I said, I'm a lawyer. I have no education background. It's like, who am I to do this? Except I'm a very concerned parent and grandparent and citizen. So I am starting, it's called Laurel Community School. It will be a Christian micro school. That's a whole nother topic. Micro schools are kind of exploding around the country. But the idea is to try to develop a model that will be affordable, lower in cost, so that even with the education savings accounts that will help with tuition, this will make it an option for even more families.
Absolutely. Well, glad to hear it. Wish you all success in that endeavor. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Coming back to you, Rebekah, you mentioned earlier that there's a rally coming up. I know that a lot of our viewers on the show really enjoy attending rallies. We haven't had one in a while. The last big rallies were about coronavirus, but tell us about this new rally, where it's going to be, how people can show their support.
Yeah. Okay, it is coming up on Saturday, May 8th, and it's going to be at the Governor's Mansion from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And we want lots and lots of people to come. We are going to be having speakers. I think all of the women that are on here, Kofi, Alfrieda, and Oredola will be speaking for sure. And there will be others as well. But really, it's just an opportunity for us to gather people from in the Twin Cities, outside of the Twin Cities. We really want to spread the word about this because, as you pointed out earlier, Kyle, this is it's an upward climb for us to pass these ESAs in the state of Minnesota. And so the more people that show up at that rally, the more the governor and the legislators will see how important this issue is, not just to a few of us, but to lots and lots of us. And so we'd really encourage people to be, Oredola put together a great informational flyer that includes some of the data that she shared tonight. And maybe you could, I don't know, I think that is going to be sent out through Alpha News, but maybe Kyle, you'd be able to send that out through the First Tuesday Conservatives group as well. And that includes information about the rally as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll be sure to distribute that. Very important. Switching gears a little bit, I understand there's something called the Page Amendment and that it's unpopular among school choice circles. We've heard how important it is to promote this issue. Tell us, how important is it that we also oppose the Page Amendment?
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit about that. So the Page Amendment is a constitutional amendment supposed to allow, or supposed to create quality. It says quality public schools. It doesn't define quality. It does, and then the word public is also disconcerting because what is public? I'm a parent that, when I was having issues with the St. Paul public school systems, I moved my kids to charter school, thinking there would be some improvements there. And the same problems in the public schools ended up in the charter schools because the administration was doing the same things there. It was imposing itself on the charter schools. And so when you say public schools and you define all schools as quality public schools, you can impose yourself all over. So that's my fear with the Page Amendment, that you are not giving it out to any of these the private schools, the ones that the data shows are successful. You're kind of doing a one size fits all. And in addition, it does take away, you now have to you resort to going to the courts. If there's a problem you think there's a problem with education, it now gets handled by the courts. And, I think that's a recipe for disaster, actually. You can't go to the Supreme Court and try to talk to the judge. You can't, redress your grievances to anyone. So that's a problem. It takes away the power, the little power that you have and control that you have to move your kids around, could all be taken away from you because you don't know what the final, what that judge will say. You no longer have the ability to control your destiny that you have right now, to a limited amount right now.
So they want
to, litigation is very expensive. If you're just a family with an issue, getting a law firm to take your case can be challenging. So it really does put you at the mercy of the legal system. And that sounds, on the one hand, it sounds, who wouldn't want to have the legal system, there at your disposal, but it's not as easy as it sounds.
That makes a lot of sense. So they want to amend the state constitution to give basically jurisdiction over how schools are run to the courts, which is going to be tremendously difficult, expensive, and time consuming. And this is all to pursue quality public schools. Did they ever define quality? What metrics are they using to assess quality? Right. Because clearly what they're doing right now doesn't work.
Right. And that was actually the comment I was going to make in addition to what Oredola said, is that they talk about standards that the state is going to decide upon, but they still don't define what quality means. And that's another issue. So really, in my opinion, this whole amendment is about virtue signaling, saying we really care. We don't like seeing this achievement gap. So we want to change this constitutional amendment or add this constitutional amendment to say that we care. But in the end, it's really not going to make any changes. It's probably going to end up costing more money for the state. We already pour tons of money into our public school system. Sorry. And as Alfrieda pointed out, we're spending $26,000 a year on every student in Minneapolis, and yet look at the results we're getting. So how is bringing this to the courts going to have to decide what they think quality means, and then go back to the districts and they have to implement it? Well, haven't we already been trying to do that with standards? And yet look at the results we're getting. So now you're going to have less local control, which we already have lost a lot of local control. And now it virtually removes it completely.
Yes, and the state we're going to be the one, when the parents sue, the state is going to be the one defending the lawsuit. So that's why it's going to cost a lot of money for the state.
Right.
And I'm a lawyer too, like Alfrieda, and I know how things work. It's going to create a whole new class of litigants.
Right.
Just like with tobacco litigation or asbestos or whatever, it's going to just, yeah. And also it takes so long to have a lawsuit.
Right.
You sue your kids in 10th grade, you're not even going to have a resolution by the time they graduate.
Right.
And plus, there's this, as far as virtue signaling goes, like Rebekah was talking about, there's an article in the Star Trib or in the Pioneer Press on the Page Amendment, and it says it's more than an education policy. It's a value statement. And so basically, that's all it is. It's virtue signaling and a value statement. And what I like about education savings account and having the money follow the student is it's not virtue signaling. It's not a value statement. It's something tangible. The money can go with the student to a different school should the parents choose. It's not even mandatory. And so that's why I am, working so hard on this because it's something tangible that can make a difference. And it's something people want. Like a lot of people say, oh, if we do this, oh, the poor kids are going to be left in the schools and they're not going to move. Well, they're already moving. I spoke to a man who lives in North Minneapolis, and he said there was a school there that had 237 students. And after COVID, there's only 100 left because the parents got mad, their kids weren't being educated, and they put them in schools in Maple Grove and moved them. So it's very insulting to say that people who are poor or people who are of color or people who live in the inner city don't care about their kids enough to want to move them to a different school. It's just difficult to do so when you don't have the money. But we love our kids. People of color love their kids. The inner city people love their kids. And that example proves that they will move their kids when they can.
It's
And
such a
didn't you-
convoluted- Oh, no.
I was just going to say, Oredola, didn't you mention too that something like 74% of African American parents are in favor of school choice? Is that the right statistic?
Yeah, I've heard yes, that is true. I mean, it's probably even more than that. I mean, my experience with so this was during the Valeria Silva, she was the superintendent of St. Paul Public School. That's when things really started to fall apart. The people that moved their kids out of the district were Black and Hispanic parents. And so, yeah, they went to charters, they went wherever they could. So in fact, there were all these news articles on how the, Black and Hispanic, kids are leaving the district. So yeah, we are most interested in school choice. We're most interested in educational outcomes because, we don't have a huge inheritance from grandpa to live on. It's about when you educate your kids, then the kids are set for life. So it's very, very critical for immigrants, low income earners, minorities to get a good education because that is the way out of poverty. I myself am from an immigrant family, so education is key, absolutely key.
Can I also add that when you hear legislators who are opposed to school choice of any kind talk about this issue, they'll say, oh, well, but the money is going to support these private schools, and they name Blake or Breck. And they'll say where the headmaster is making, $500,000 a year or whatever, which I don't even know if that's true that they're making that kind of money. But I can tell you that is not what the majority of private schools are like in Minnesota. Most headmasters at most schools are probably not even making $100,000. And they are working hard to give their students the best education they possibly can. So they can't use, that's a fallacy really that those legislators are using. They're pointing to a situation that doesn't at all represent the vast majority of private schools. So I would encourage the Republican legislators who support school choice to call these legislators out on that. They need to be called out. That is not even the right kind of comparison to be making.
Absolutely. That's an excellent segue into another question that I was wondering, and that is, what do you think the impact would be on the population of public versus private schools if school choice were to be implemented? Because it seems like you'd have this tidal wave of new private schools and a total depopulation of public schools. Is that accurate, or do you think the public schools would try to improve their education to retain students?
I think the latter. I mean, I think that, and again, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at some of the research across the nation, it's bearing that out. If the achievement gap is being narrowed in states where this type of legislation is passed, then clearly that means that we are seeing an improvement in all the schools, because just a handful of private schools isn't going to close that achievement gap. Right. So that means the public schools have to be improving too. And, I think about states like Massachusetts, where private school is so much more common than it is like here in the state of Minnesota. And their public schools usually are very high quality. And I think part of the reason for that is because they have had to historically compete with some of these top private schools. And so that's the only way they've been able to compete, is to maintain the high level of excellence. And so I really believe that while you might see more private schools pop up after ESAs pass, I think you would also still see the public schools really increase the expectations and the bar. Again, you hear this term systemic racism. I don't think there's anything more systemically racist than low expectations in a public school setting, and to expect that and assume that these kids can't learn, or that we have to lower the standards, or that we have to change the grading for them, or change the rules about behavior. I mean, that is not setting kids up for success. And that's one of the things that I think really needs to be pointed out also by our legislators.
You just made a very powerful argument there that I was not previously familiar with. That is that the real power of school choice isn't that you're going to move more kids to better private schools. It's that you're going to provide competition for the public schools and force them to improve. So the way this is usually framed is people see it as private versus public. It's really not. It's about improving education across all types of schools for the benefit of students. One of my final questions here for anybody on the panel is, why is this a politicized issue? Why do Democrats generally not favor school choice? Because I really can't understand why this is controversial.
One word: unions.
Union.
They fund their campaigns, yes. And they are not in favor of school choice.
And it's like teachers have unions and kids have nobody. And when I call my school and I'm upset about something, some indoctrination or low standards or whatever it is, they say, well, what you gonna do? This is where you go. This is your neighborhood. Where you gonna go? Shut up. I don't want to hear it. But then there's just no incentive. And one thing I was thinking about today was, it'd be really, the unions donate a lot of money to one of the political parties. And I was like, it'd be nice if all of us parents got together and put in $5 each and matched what the unions are contributing. It's a good idea. So maybe the politicians would listen to us, because I understand money talks. They need that money. They're human beings. They need the money to run their campaigns. And now they're forced to be loyal to this group. And so that was just one dreamy idea I had today.
I think it's a good idea, Kofi. Let's add that to the whole list of ideas. Talk about that at the school choice rally.
Speaking of the rally, I just want to remind people again, that's on May 8th outside the governor's mansion. And you said it's from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. And governor's mansion in St. Paul. Yes, the governor has a mansion. I don't know why. And May the 8th, that's a Saturday. If people want to find out more resources about school choice, about all of your very interesting work, and about this rally, where can they go?
Our website, theexodusmn.org. So the Exodus Minnesota MN.org.
Absolutely, theexodusminnesota.org.
Correct. And we encourage them also to write their lawmakers. There's the key lawmakers in the Senates and in the House, and that's listed on the website. There's even a template, people can use for get some ideas on how to write a letter. And then there's also links on where you click to find out who your lawmaker is for your district.
One thing I just thought of, speaking of key figures, Governor Walz, isn't he a former teacher? Doesn't he always remind audiences that he used to be an educator? Where does he stand on this issue? Is he signaled?
I don't know where he stands, but hopefully after this rally and speaking to him, he's going to be standing on the side of ESAs. And, I just have hope. I mean, I know the unions gave him a lot of money for his campaign, but just seeing how he's been able to change his mind on things, I'm just hoping that's hope that he's willing to listen to the people and to change his mind on this, especially in the era where people are talking about equity. And this is something tangible to move things in that direction.
Absolutely. Well,
So hopefully with us.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I suppose only time will really tell where the chips fall on this, but if you want to have a hand in deciding where those chips fall, again, you should show up to this rally on May the 8th. That's a Saturday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. outside Governor Walz's mansion in St. Paul. You'll see our guests there, Rebekah, Kofi, Alfrieda, Oredola. It was very nice speaking with you all, ladies, tonight. I hope that many of our viewers attend your rally. I might be there as well, covering it with Alpha News. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
To all of our viewers, thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you very soon. God bless.
Thank you for